This content is brought to you by Algorand, which is building the future of finance. Algorand is one of the leading projects in the crypto industry. It is getting significant adoption and investments. This content is also brought to you by TaxBit, which is the leading tax service provider in the crypto industry. I'm personally a TaxBit user. It makes it so easy to plug in my exchange accounts and calculate my crypto gains and losses. So if you'd like to learn more about Algorand and TaxBit, please visit the links in the description of the podcast and YouTube video. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto channel, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Patrick Sells, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at NYDIG. Patrick, great to have you on the channel.
Thanks, man. Great to be on. And I love all the crypto hats you have back there. I feel like I've got nothing but a boring white wall here.
Well, funny enough, I got to tell you a quick story. I recently interviewed Anthony Scaramucci, and he roasted the hell out of me because he's like, your background looks like you're a hostage and you should blink twice if you need help. So I took his advice and I decorated a bit. So appreciate that.
Sounds like I need to apply the same advice.
Well, Patrick, I want to learn about all the great things NYDIG is doing with Bitcoin and banks, and a lot of my listeners and viewers as well. I'm pretty excited to be speaking with you. And I thought we'll kick it off with your background. If you can tell us where you're from and where'd you grow up?
Yeah, not really from anywhere, actually. I moved about every 2-3 years as a kid from LA to London and everywhere in between, but spent kind of the later part of my teenage years, early adult years in rural Indiana. So I guess I'd claim Indiana as home.
And what did you do before working at NYDIG?
Yeah, about 4 years ago, I got into banking for the first time. I had started a technology consulting digital marketing company in college, but always had a love of finance and how to think about new technologies. And, had met a bank called Quantic, and they were looking to really become more of a digital bank. And at the same time, a lot of my friends had, started talking to me about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And it was something that I didn't really understand. And frankly, I didn't really want to do the work to understand. I thought, wow, I wish I could just go to a bank and get a Bitcoin rewards debit card or credit card. And kind of the right opportunity came with this bank. And so I moved to New York, joined Quantic as their chief innovation officer, and set out on a path to figure out how to bring Bitcoin and banking together.
Wow. Now, along the way, you mentioned some friends told you about Bitcoin. What was your aha moment where it clicked for you? Because some people hear about it. It took me literally 10 times. My friend kept telling me about it. And I'm like, whatever, man, don't talk to me about that. And then I saw some articles and I saw about the price going up, and then it had my attention. What was your aha moment?
I think really for a long time, it was just something that was new technology, which I'd always had an interest in. But I don't know that it really clicked until I got to NYDIG. So when I was at Quantic trying to figure out how to launch this Bitcoin rewards card, which we did in the fall of 2020, we were the first bank to launch a retail Bitcoin product. NYDIG was our partner behind the scenes. And so I came over to NYDIG and was able to really get an understanding as to how to think about Bitcoin as a form of money. And what that really was about was being reminded of how to think about money. I think that's something that's so obvious in some ways that most of us just kind of skip, or we don't, take time to really think about what is money and how do I think about that? And as I really began to understand kind of the fundamentals of money, then really the lights clicked and I realized that money is Bitcoin, Bitcoin is money, and it's the best form of money. And so that's really when the aha moment happened for me. I think I, began to then understand Bitcoin, the network, and all the more just excited me and energized me to go, to be in this space. But it was really about, understanding money.
For sure. And I ask all my guests what they hold in their crypto portfolio. I'm assuming you have Bitcoin. Anything else that you're holding?
I would fall in the camp of Bitcoin maximalist. Big believer in Bitcoin. And so it's all I own.
Let's talk NYDIG. Can you give us an overview of the company, its history, mission, and current services?
Yes, so our mission is financial security for all, and we actually share that mission with our parent company, which is called Stone Ridge Holdings.
Hmm.
And I think part of how we see, our role in creating financial security is by making Bitcoin available to everyone. And so that's really our mission. The history of NYDIG, as I mentioned, we come from a parent company called Stone Ridge. Today, we're one of 3 operating subsidiaries of Stone Ridge. And really the need for NYDIG was birthed out of Stone Ridge Holdings' own need. Back in 2014, 2015, had begun accumulating Bitcoin on our balance sheet, and that wasn't very popular by institutions that looked like us at that time.
Sure.
And got to a point where we didn't, our auditors didn't know how to give us an audit or give us a clean audit, because what's this Bitcoin thing? And so we asked them to help us go out into the market to find a counterpart that met our audit and regulatory requirements, and we couldn't. And so decided, well, we're not going to not own Bitcoin. And so let's go build what we need. And that's really how NYDIG got started. It was turned into its own entity in 2017. And I'd say really from 2017 till 2020, NYDIG was, served institutions that looked like us. We had built everything in-house, from derivatives to custody, execution, liquidity. And so we were really a white glove, services for Bitcoin and digital assets. And about the same time, what had happened is, while I was at Quantic, began realizing what now is the main thrust of NYDIG, which was we could take this kind of institutional grade technology stack and wrap it in APIs, and now go bring that out to other institutions in a way that enabled them to serve their customers and employees. And so, a great analog is thinking of Amazon and AWS. And I know a lot of startups like to use that as an example, but the reality is Amazon had to solve its problem at the biggest scale possible. And only once they were able to do that, they were able to then turn around and let others take advantage of that infrastructure. And so very similar with NYDIG, Stone Ridge had to solve the biggest, hardest problem at its time, which was, how does a real regulated institution own Bitcoin? And once we were able to solve that, realized, okay, now we can go and take it out. And so that part of our business still exists and is thriving. We call it institutional finance. And we're working in a way that's kind of one-on-one for other institutions like Bitcoin miners or hedge funds, family offices, to use our technology and services for themselves. The much bigger part of NYDIG, which is the part that's probably less understood, is what we call platform solutions. And really what we're doing there is embedding a wallet inside of a bank or a fintech or a merchant, anyone, so that they can have a crypto offering to their consumers.
That's pretty incredible. And you have some very big partners as well that are helping you to accomplish the services that you're putting out. And I interviewed one of them from NCR. Can you tell us a bit about NCR and your other partners like Allied Payment Network and how you're working with them?
Sure. So, in the world of banks and credit unions, and there's about 5,000 banks and about 5,000 credit unions, something that's not usually understood by the mass public is that they don't have control over their digital applications. Most all the time, 96, 97%, they're renting software from a service provider like an NCR or an Alchemy or Q2, Ally, FIS, Fiserv, and they are dependent on them for the user experience. And so, as that's part of why the banking industry over the last decade was slower with innovation. Fintechs, had built their own digital applications that they controlled. And so if they wanted to add a button or a feature, it was very easy. They could just go in and code. Whereas if you're a bank or a credit union, you can't just go in and code the software, right? Like you and I can't log into Netflix and say, well, I want it to look different. We're dependent on Netflix. And so as we began to build out this business, we knew that ultimately to make this really easy, we needed to take the financial institutions, the banks and the credit unions that wanted to do something, and leverage them towards their technology providers, all those partners we just mentioned, so that ultimately it would be built at the infrastructure level and not require coding. It comes now, you can now think about being able to have digital assets inside of a bank or credit union as turnkey as they could have mobile check deposit, right? That's what those partnerships enable. So now, a bank or credit union in less than 30 days can begin to offer, a range of Bitcoin products and services.
And I find that strategy very smart, to your point, to try to go get these banks or federal credit unions to adopt a new technology. It's going to be pretty hard, right? You're going to run into some friction, but if you go into the already infrastructure they're running on, like NCR and Allied and so forth, makes it a lot easier. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of people innovating in this space, don't realize that. And so, hey, here's this really cool code I have, and you go talk to a financial institution. Well, even if they love your technology or what you're doing, they don't have any easy way of making it possible, right? And so the lack of understanding has stifled innovation in the industry. Whereas I think what we'll see this year is probably the greatest wave of innovation in the industry, in terms of the number of credit unions and banks now doing something with crypto, and it's because enabled it at the infrastructure level.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of the banks and credit unions, there's reports that you guys are working with over 300, if not 600, from certain reports I've seen. I would love if you can give us the ballpark number. And it seems like it's banks and credit unions, which are spread across the United States. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so we've got partners from the 100 million in assets, so about as small as you could be as a bank or a credit union, up to the largest banks in the country. Where we are today is, I believe that when 2022 finishes, we will have over 1,000 financial institutions, banks or credit unions live. And the reason why you've maybe heard different numbers is in different interviews or media opportunities, well, what about next quarter or by this summer? And so kind of going back to that conversation around the technology partners, not only did the integrations have to get done, but then you have to get slotted into your queue to go live with it. And there's a kind of a rollout process. I think, the other comment is this industry really works like a herd. And once you've kind of triggered that herd, everyone then, moves forward because there's kind of strength and comfort in numbers. And so, it's not inconceivable to me that there's many more than 1,000 institutions live by the end of the year. A lot of it that, though, will depend on the technology providers and their ability to spin up this many instances.
Wow. Patrick, listening to you say that 1,000 financial institutions, including banks and federal credit unions, will be able to offer Bitcoin services, that as a Bitcoin holder makes me very bullish. Tell us about the services they will be able to offer to their respective clientele, these banks and federal credit unions.
Yeah, so I think what we've tried to do is enable this concept of you plus Bitcoin. And so for many, the starting point is, hey, let's get a wallet embedded the way that Cash App or PayPal offers it, so your customers can buy, sell, hold, right? And then from there, we can begin to expand into a broader range of bank products plus Bitcoin. So, hey, you can have a Bitcoin rewards card instead of getting cash back or points, right? Really cool. That was the first thing created. And the rewards I was earning in the first couple of months I had my Bitcoin card were 1.5% at the time. But today that's about 10% back. There's no card in the country that's 10% off, right? Or, hey, I have a savings account and I'd like to get the interest paid to me in Bitcoin as opposed to dollars. Or lending, being able to programmatically borrow dollars from your bank at low cost, the way that you could today from a Coinbase, but being able to take advantage of the ease and trust of your financial institution. And I think all of this is important because as we understand Bitcoin as a network, and the more users on the network, the more valuable the network becomes. If we think about it, access to Bitcoin or crypto really hasn't gotten that much easier. Despite all of the conversation happening, there's still only so many places you can go to. And so what we're trying to do is to make access, multiples more available by using your bank or credit union. And then also by these products like rewards or interest for someone who's maybe not felt comfortable buying Bitcoin before. Okay, well, leave your money in an FDIC insured savings account and take your interest paid to you in Bitcoin. That feels like a very low risk, easy way to get started. Wow. Whereas for people like ourselves who love Bitcoin, it just makes it so easy to programmatically kind of begin to accumulate Bitcoin in all kinds of ways in your life without having to think about it.
Wow. I love it. And I could just imagine, because I'm thinking about my own parents who I've helped to buy Bitcoin, but I had to do it, right? But if they went to their local bank, which is like a county bank or city bank, not a national bank, and they were it was proposed to them, hey, take some of your interest payments in Bitcoin or buy some Bitcoin, I can imagine they would say yes, and very easily so, because they trust that institution and they're much older. And would those banks custody the Bitcoin, or are you guys providing the custodial services?
Yeah, great question. And your example of your mom is what I've been able to hear just thousands of times. And what's been fun is even from bank employees or CEOs or board members who all of a sudden now they're excited to be able to buy Bitcoin for the first time because it's easy and it feels comfortable and feels trusted. Versus having to take a selfie holding up my driver's license and figure out what I need to do. In terms of the custodian, yeah, so that's what NYDIG's role is, right? So we think of us as kind of partnering as almost sister financial institutions, but through an integrated mobile app. So when you go into your bank, you can custody your dollars with your bank, but then you can custody your Bitcoin with NYDIG. And so NYDIG is the legal provider and the actual custodian and all of those relationships.
That's just amazing. And it sounds like the rollout will be happening, well, a lot of these branches, because I've seen some news items, this credit union or this little bank via NYDIG is able to launch its services. So the rollout's going to be happening a lot this year.
Yeah, there's probably one a day at this point. We've had some days with 2 or 3 banks or credit unions going live and into production. And I think we'll just see that continue to increase, the number of FIs per day going live. Very exciting time.
Now, a question I want to ask you, and it's also a bit broader because we saw the FDIC chairwoman, if I'm not mistaken, she was talking about helping banks being able to hold digital assets and being able to provide a federal insurance service, if you want to call it that, for that. Because right now they do provide the FDIC and insurance for cash. So does that come into play in any way, and in magnitude of the crypto regulations that we are maybe waiting on? Anything you can shed light on there?
Yeah, my sense from conversations with regulators and our partners is at kind of a meta level, 2 things are happening. One is a recognition that a lot of things taking place in the crypto ecosystem are probably being done illegally. I'd comment here that there's this sense that crypto is not regulated, and I can understand that view. But on the other hand, I think when you think about money in this country, there's very well-established precedent as to, is this thing that involves money, and everything fits into one of 3 boxes. It's a security, it's a commodity, or it's legal tender, fiat. And crypto is obviously not fiat. And so then is it a commodity or security? And without going far down that rabbit hole, I think a lot of things are being done in a way that isn't legal, and we're seeing increased focus there from the regulators. And so they need to stop all of that, but in a way that doesn't cause adverse or systemic, failure or losses to American consumers. At the same time, a real recognition that blockchain is an incredibly powerful and disruptive technology, and it's not going anywhere. And in order for real institutions to feel comfortable about betting here and investing here and rolling out products, you need really clear rules. And so in one sense, it's how do we, and they want America to lead innovation here the way we led the internet. And so in one sense, it's, we need to quickly stop the bad stuff and put in clear rules. But at the same time, we don't want to do that in a way that comes at the expense of Americans. And so I think, and all of that, you kind of bring it down a level. What's happening now across the various regulators and the regulatory bodies is, okay, how do they, or how do we collectively think about what's happening and what is this thing? And once we can agree what it is, then it becomes really clear who should regulate it and what rules apply for it. And so I think, you know, what we're going to see, and we've seen, is just this continued emphasis on the maturation of that apparatus so that institutions can go forward. And I, you know, that's something we get asked often about, well, what about insurance for Bitcoin and crypto? And the reality is, well, there is a, you know, a nascent insurance market. It's not really tested in the court of law or how it plays out. And that is, I think, one of the shortcomings in the industry today. But I know ourselves and others in the crypto ecosystem are working on figuring out how can we build something there for people. And so, you know, I would like to believe and hope that there is a real insurance solution, whether it's private or government, you know, at some time in the next 12 to 18 months.
For sure. And I think we're seeing at least some progress where more members of Congress are becoming Bitcoiners. They're buying Bitcoin. I think just Ted Cruz just did. And Senator Cynthia Lummis has been a holder of Bitcoin. So, you know, it's great to see members of Congress coming together, both sides of the aisle, and hopefully they can get all these things worked out and bring some clarity to the market. Not overregulate, like you said, light touch, but clarity. What can banks do? What can they hold? What are the guardrails? So on and so forth. I want to ask you about the news we got in December of your NYDIG's $1 billion funding round. Can you tell us about that and who participated, and as well as how will the funds be used moving forward?
Sure. You know, great testament to the NYDIG business and the team here to have that type of raise happen and the vote of confidence. I think core to our approach around raising money has been to raise money from strategic partners or people that we're doing business with that share a long-term view of the ecosystem. You know, those of us that have been around in crypto for a while, you can remember the days of 2018 in the bear market. And I think thinking, okay, yes, there may still be some chop in the water ahead of us, but ultimately there are real institutions and companies that are betting big in this space, and we want to be partners in the long run. And so the majority of that money came from the partners that we have, you know, companies like FIS and Fiserv, New York Life, Mass Mutual, the fintech Affirm, you know, the buy now, pay later guys, many banks and credit unions and others kind of across the ecosystem, as well as the lead in that round, which has been a great partner of ours, Westcap, who led the round. And so as we think about, okay, now what are we doing with that $1 billion we've just raised? It goes back to kind of the analogy I shared of our origin and history in Amazon and AWS. Now we've built this thing and we've built it into the infrastructure at the infrastructure level of the financial system, both in America and globally. And now we need to bring that to life, right? And so how do we stand up 1,000 banks? You know, that type of fintech adoption has never happened before, ever in history. And so it's at a scale that's never been done. That requires a lot of people and a lot of bodies, as well as I think ultimately part of our role is to help provide education and be a trusted voice in the ecosystem. But, you know, the other comment I'd give you is we think about the NYDIG business and where we're going and this mission of financial security and Bitcoin for all. The banks and credit unions are a very important vertical that we are focused on, but we also see the opportunity to do similar things in all kinds of other verticals and really do make Bitcoin available. So whether that's corporations, merchants, payments companies. And so part of it's also the build out of additional verticals and new product use cases.
For sure. Yeah, I can certainly see other industries needing the same infrastructure that you're providing to banks and credit unions. Is there plans to go beyond the United States?
So in the late last fall, we announced the acquisition of a Lightning payments company called BottlePay. BottlePay is based in the UK, and that was intentional both for the technology and the team that BottlePay had put together, but also our plans as we begin to think about really what's needed at a global level. So, right now, largely focused in the US, but our eyes on the world. And I think as we go through 2022 and 2023, ultimately, we know the way to create financial security for all is by bringing Bitcoin to the whole world and plan to be active accordingly.
Now, speaking of going beyond Bitcoin, are there plans to eventually offer other digital assets aside from Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think the way we think about that is this kind of philosophically believe that Bitcoin is unique and different amongst in the digital asset world, and in particular the role it is playing and will play in the financial future. I think commercially we have chosen to say we are regulatory first. Fundamentally we see this as an equal parts exercise in regulations as technology, and I think that's a bit unique to NYDIG and the ecosystem. And at a platform level, we're agnostic. So the way then that I kind of would translate that is NYDIG today does actually support more than just Bitcoin in our institutional business, not in our kind of B2B2C business or platform solutions world. But as the regulatory clarity comes to other tokens, and are they being done? What is it? Is it a commodity? Is it a security? And is it being done legally? Once we have that clarity, then we would make the asset available on our platform. And then partners of ours could choose to say, we want to enable that or not as an offering to our end consumers. And so I think with the rate of kind of focus and build out we're seeing from the regulators, very much envision a world where we will be able to make available a couple of other digital assets this year. That could all change, but that's kind of what we're planning on.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to see. And as you mentioned, certainly the regulatory clarity is needed there around many of the altcoins. Tell us about the announcement we heard, I think it was just literally last week, of the Bitcoin savings plan and the ability for companies to easily auto transition salaries and things to Bitcoin. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. This was actually something I began working on really during day one on the job. And so to see it come to life has been exciting. What realized was, look, people, and we've seen it a lot in the news from celebrities and athletes, taking part of their pay in Bitcoin, and thought, okay, let's create a solution that works for corporations to feel good about what, they're doing. And so what it is a optional benefit that allows companies to say to their employees, hey, you can take a percentage of your net pay and automatically allocate it to Bitcoin. You can change what that percentage is at any time. You can stop it. But it's an optional benefit. It's a really easy way for a company to say, okay, here's something we can do. And I think it's important because when we look at consumer research and the stats, people are very much, willing to have the same job and the same pay, but would switch companies for one that offered, Bitcoin payroll as part of the compensation package. And also, with how tight the labor markets are, allowing companies to have something new and innovative is important. And it's also just a great way that at the end of the day, like why 401ks work for us to save money and HSAs is you're taking away the friction of having to make a conscious decision on payday. And you can make one decision and then kind of forget about it. And that's really what, trying to do here as well is help people begin to allocate, part of their compensation to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I love it. I would certainly do that. If I had that option even years ago, I would have been allocating. And Is this available to pretty much any company that wants to opt in, or are there any stipulations, public, private, things like that?
Yeah, no, we have companies that have, I think, 3 employees signed up to companies that are hundreds of thousands. And the way we built it is that it doesn't require an integration. And so it's very, very easy to roll out, especially if you're a small company. That's one of the things, hear often, well, how hard is it going to be? Or what if I don't have a super large HR team? But then you hear similar kind of concerns at really large companies, which is, well, whoa, how am I going to roll this out? And the reality is it takes no time and it's very easy to do. And so any kind of company, public, private, any size, nonprofits, you name it, can use the product for their employees.
And would it be similar to how you're currently set up with the banks and credit unions, where you're custodying the Bitcoin for the respective users, or is it a different type of account setup?
No, exactly right. Kind of going back to this concept as Bitcoin as a service or an embedded wallet, what we're trying to say is, hey, company, here's an embedded wallet that you can make available to your employees. It's all powered by NYDIG and takes advantage of the NYDIG. We use a 100% cold storage custody solution. And the institutional grade platform we built is what's being leveraged. And so we are the custodian, and there's a lot of comfort in that, but making it really easy and seamless for the company and the employee.
Now, you covered a lot of the things that we can expect this year, but I did want to ask, anything else on the 2022 roadmap that you want to give any hints on?
One of the things that I'm spending a lot of my time on and excited about is what we're doing in the rewards and loyalty space. And so really kind of our case study of this was Landry's largest privately held group of restaurants, from Morton Steakhouse to Bubblegum Shrimp and a bunch of, Chartwell and Oceanair. And one of the strengths of Landry's is their loyalty program. I think they have around 5 million members in it. But, if you think about a loyalty program, the value that your points get for you really never go anywhere but down or maybe stay static at best. And so if all of a sudden now you can take your points and have them denominated in Bitcoin versus dollars, really powerful for the Bitcoiner, those of us that understand it. But again, it creates a really low friction point for someone to maybe own Bitcoin for the first time or to experience Bitcoin for the first time. By saying, hey, I'll take these points I have and convert them to Bitcoin. And for the company, it's super powerful because now all of a sudden, if you think about like Landry's or any restaurant or, loyalty program you're a part of, you don't have a lot of reason to log in every day, right? Like, unless I'm using it, I'm probably not going to log into it. But what we're seeing is that, okay, you put Bitcoin there and the price of Bitcoin and this concept, you're logging in every day now. And that's so important for a business to be able to stay top of mind to their consumers. And so really fun to be able to kind of innovate in a world where you can use Bitcoin to drive a traditional P&L strategy. And that's so that, there's all kinds of extensions of it, from rebates and gift cards and rewards in Bitcoin. And I just think, tremendous opportunity to make Bitcoin available to more people and really powerful from a business perspective. So you'll see a lot more coming from us and new partners in that space.
Yeah, just thinking from the business side, that's a great retention and engagement play. I think even PayPal had reported when they had added crypto services, they saw their traffic and return traffic really increase significantly. So love that. And like you said, some of those rewards, nothing happens to them. No one cares, but now they have a reason to care, which is awesome.
Yeah, I log into my Landry's app every day now to see what the value of my points are. And we see that happening with Landry's user base. The Bitcoin rewards member is multiples more engaged than the non-Bitcoin rewards member.
For sure. Okay, let's switch over to the crypto market at large. I want to talk about Bitcoin's adoption. We're seeing corporates putting on their balance sheet. You guys are helping banks and credit unions to offer services around it. There's a Bitcoin mining boom in the United States after the China ban. And El Salvador has made it a legal tender. We're seeing bills being introduced by states looking to make it a legal tender. What is your take on the growth we're seeing? And do you see continual growth, this year and next year and so forth?
Yeah, so one of the analogies I think helpful to think about Bitcoin is not only do you have this tremendous form of money, but it's built on a network theory. And when we look to, okay, how do we understand the value of any network? You can use Metcalfe's law, which tells us that the value of the network is directly proportional to the number of nodes on the network. In other words, how many users, not about super users or not, it's just simply users. And so when we think now about, okay, what are other networks that we've experienced? I think Airbnb or Uber are great examples. I remember when Airbnb started and I wanted to go on vacation to the Bahamas, and there was like one option and it didn't quite look like it fit what I was looking for, right? And that was true for a lot of us. But now you log into Airbnb and you look at the Bahamas and there's 100 options, right? And that more likely now that we'll use it. And once you experience it, maybe you're more likely to put your home or a room up on Airbnb. And now Airbnb has more listings than the top 7 hotel companies combined, right? It's an open network. And so we think about Bitcoin and what's happening at either an institutional level, a country like El Salvador, Access in America. What we're really doing is adding users or nodes to the network. And that's what's driving the growth and the value in it. And what we know about networks is they kind of hit, a certain velocity when they just take off, right? And now Uber's everywhere, Airbnb's everywhere. And so I think as more users, and this is what the beauty of Bitcoin is as more users get on the network, every participant in the network benefits because the value of their Bitcoin is going to go up.
Yeah.
And so I think as that continues to happen and access is fundamentally made easier, we're just going to see an even more rapid expansion of adoption of Bitcoin around the world.
Now, on that note, not asking for a price prediction, but rather, do you feel we are still in a bull market cycle, given Bitcoin's pullback, but we're seeing a bounce now? Any thoughts on the outlook for 2022?
Yeah, obviously that's the $1 million question in many ways, or a million Satoshis. I think there's obviously speculation and leverage in Bitcoin today. I think that what will happen is as more users get on the network, the impact that speculation or leverage has will continue to compress. And we'll see a more stable price and also a continually growing price. Now, there may be things in the market from regulatory actions that causes things to step back, or broader market economy things happening that affects all assets. But ultimately, it's hard for me not to envision a world where Bitcoin doesn't have its best year ever in 2022.
For sure. What are your thoughts on NFTs and the markets? Well, I should say the NFT market booming. It's certainly a branch off the crypto asset class. And would NYDIG, are you guys thinking about NFTs, exploring anything there?
It's a great question. I think the idea of NFTs is a great use case as to the power of blockchain technology and being able to have ownership in a digital world. And so I like a lot about NFTs. I think that being said, there's a lot happening today in the NFT world that makes no sense to me. And I struggled to really get it, but whatever, we'll figure it out as we go. I think in terms of NYDIG's role, it's something that we're looking at. I mean, our heritage is that of financial services, and we're focused on, financial security. And so I think part of the lens by which we look at everything we do is how does this help create financial security? And I think we can look at Bitcoin and very clearly say, yes, that makes sense. Being in the business of, digital ownership may not be the thing for NYDIG, may be the thing. I think we're open, but not something that we're actively focused on, largely because it's not super clear yet how it aligns with, our mission as a company.
Yeah, for sure. It's still in its early phase, and I myself still don't know what to make of it. And I don't want to buy a Bored Ape, but I do believe in the technology. of being able to show digital ownership. But where that goes, beyond bored apes and ninjas and whatever it is, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on the metaverse? A lot of folks have different opinions. I personally believe we are in Metaverse 1.0 because a lot of our identity is already online. But as far as creating worlds where we can go in from a VR standpoint or Oculus, whatever it is, I guess that's what's being built now. But what are your thoughts on it?
I actually probably got interested in VR before I did crypto. 6 or 7 years ago, I began to actively explore the space and was just blown away by what I experienced and learned, and realized that in many ways, I think VR, AR holds the same transformative power that the printing press did, as another means of communication, another dimension of communication. So I would say I'm very enamored with and focused on the technology of it. I think Metaverse is a pretty well done rebranding of kind of a messy internet world we live in today, and trying to recast all of that in a more aspirational, exciting, innovative space. I think many of the largest internet companies, have gotten hammered over data and privacy and the stuff that's happening on their platforms. And so let's use this as a chance to say, hey, kind of forget about all of this. Let's focus on where we're going. That part feels like very creative branding, and not wrong, because I do think that's where the world is going. In terms of what to make of it, a little bit harder to tell. I think so much of what is going to be required is ultimately how is that technology distributed to us as individuals, right? And as that gets easier and takes new form factors, I tend to think that will be the key for the quote unquote metaverse coming into all of our lives.
In some of the possible scenarios that folks have been talking about, could you envision a metaverse virtual reality version of certain stores or malls, and you're essentially walking through and you can go shop and you can buy things with Bitcoin and other digital assets? Do you think we'll eventually get there at some point?
Yeah, I do. When I don't know, like going back to my kind of story, I remember 6 or 7 years ago being at a VR studio, content creation studio, and being able to walk into a store and look at different outfits and say, like, I want that, and now it would get shipped to me. Obviously there's something about that that's deeply attractive and exciting, but it's been 7 years, and that's no really more easily done today than it was then. So I do think a world like that happens. In terms of using Bitcoin or digital currencies to make a payment or a purchase, I think that happens as well, because I think money is becoming digital. And so it only makes sense that the two things go kind of hand in hand. But I don't know that the metaverse uniquely drives crypto payments or Bitcoin payment any more than just what's happening naturally. I think one of the things that we have to think about is, for all of the advancement in technology and the wonders of it, like at some level, how do we want to think about ourselves in terms of being cyborgs, and how much of a cyborg do we want to become, right? Like I was thinking about this the other day, a cyborg is nothing more than part human, part computer. And I don't know my mom's phone number. I am completely reliant on a computer, right? And I don't know how to get to the airport. I'm completely reliant on a computer. And that's made my life more efficient in many ways. But I think there's just this kind of meta question, no pun there, of like, how far do we want to take that? And I don't have an answer for it, but I do think it's one of the things we have to, as a society, figure out as we think about what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've honestly thought about what you're saying, because I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s before the internet was a big part of my life. And I remember how to get to a place directions, and we had to actually remember phone numbers. Now it's gone. I can't. It doesn't. I go to my phone, and we trained our brains to behave in that way.
Exactly. And there's good things about that, but there's also like, okay, that could become a runaway train. And what is the best thing for us as humans is a deeper question.
For sure. Now, since we're talking about digitization and the token economy and all these things, we see central banks around the globe are building central bank digital currencies. They're taking a blockchain, tokenizing the fiat on top of it. What are your thoughts on this? It seems like it's inevitable. They're all building it. And will it be complementary to crypto?
To pick up on your word, inevitable, I think if we look at our lives in the last 12 months, probably 99% of the money that you or I were either paid or spent was actually nothing more than pixels on a screen. And so the reality is we live with the digital dollar today. But if you take off that user interface, you have this very complicated and antiquated system powering that. We have trucks and vaults and all printing presses and all these things. And so, okay, if we've already adopted this concept of a digital dollar practically, could you now recreate that in a far more efficient way underlying it? I think the answer to that is yes. And like that just makes all the sense in the world. And is exactly what's happened with technology and innovation over the last several decades. And so I do very much think we'll have a digital dollar. In terms of what it means for crypto, I don't think it's really, that's just a more efficient way of having fiat. And today we have fiat, but like I still denominate my life in Bitcoin, and I still want Bitcoin because ultimately I see it as a better form of money than fiat. So I don't see the digital dollar replacing Bitcoin any more than the dollar today replaced Bitcoin or stopped Bitcoin from happening. And so I do see a world where both fiat and Bitcoin coexist. And that's especially true probably in countries that have strong central banks and economies, whereas countries like El Salvador and many around the world for billions of people, their central bank currency or their local tender is not a very good form of money at all. And so it makes all the sense in the world to say, forget about this, let's just go and use Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel that, and this is probably a tough question, the term hyper Bitcoinization, maybe that's already happening. I don't know. Hindsight is 2020, but looking ahead and what's happening right now, do you feel that we're going to see some other countries follow El Salvador's move? And like you said, some central banks may be holding Bitcoin in their balance sheet the same way they hold gold. And could that be the spark of hyper Bitcoinization? I don't know if I articulated that well.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Look, I think every time something like that happens, it gives comfort to others to do something. I don't know that any single instance in and of itself results in the hyper Bitcoinization, because again, I go back to a network. Networks aren't driven by super users. So it's great that a corporation will buy $1 billion of Bitcoin or a central bank will put it on its balance sheet. That symbolically represents and means something very, very important. But that's actually no more valuable to the network necessarily than the person who buys $1 worth of Bitcoin for the first time, right? Now, I think where, kind of that breaks down a little bit is the reality is if you have a friend, we all have friends in our lives who are more influential than others. And if that influential friend is the one who went on Airbnb for the first time of our friend group, it's much more likely that the rest of us join Airbnb. And so I think the role that, El Salvador's played or Tesla or MicroStrategies, that they act themselves isn't more valuable than the person buying $1, but the influence they have on bringing others to the network is incredibly valuable. But again, I think when Bitcoinization or the hyper Bitcoinization will happen is again less about any individual node and it's how easy or not is access to the network, And that's really what the focus needs to be on, to bring the world the financial world that many of us want. We have to make access more possible in all kinds of ways.
I've never heard anyone break it down like you did there. But thinking of it is the person holding $10 in Bitcoin, as well as the person holding $1 billion, the network effect, and one might be more influential than the other, but regardless, you need both of them. And yeah.
Mathematically, they have the same value. $1 billion and a dollar makes no difference to the network, in and of itself. But again, there's a different level of influence to bring others onto the network. And that is important, and a very important role. And so I think you need both access to the network, but also influencers, if you will, or examples as, hey, look, you can do this too. I'll kind of figure out the hard stuff first, which is how does a country roll it out? How does a central bank own it? How does a corporation own it? How does a pension own it? How does an insurance company own it? Figure out the kind of 0 to 1 stuff, and then it makes it a lot easier for everyone else to follow.
All right, I want to hit the wrap-up questions here. Got another metaverse question for you. If you were to create your own metaverse, what would the theme be about?
That's a good question. I love art and music, and how they inspire different emotions. And so I would probably build something around the two of those, and how do you bring them together, and not just in sight and sound, but in feeling and physical feeling, how to use the electrical stimuluses, and to create certain moments. And so I think something in there is what I would go build. How about yourself?
I'm into space and sci-fi. I've talked about wanting to do something Star Wars related. I know it's kind of nerdy, or Blade Runner 2049 type of world like that. Not too dystopian, obviously, but just, I guess, the architecture, the flying cars, things like that. That would kind of be my theme.
Yeah, makes sense.
Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Anything spicy, anything with ghost pepper in particular.
Favorite musician or band?
Don't know that I have a favorite musician or band. I truly love music and poetry and lyrics. And so I love to listen to all kinds of music, because I like the way, different genres and artists weave words together. And so it's really just a love of poetry and music more than any particular artist or genre.
Favorite movie?
Good Will Hunting is what usually comes to mind. Love how the characters were developed and played out, and so much of what that story is signaling. One that I watched recently I really enjoyed was CODA, CODA, Children of Deaf Adults. I just found it deeply inspirational and positive.
I love Good Will Hunting, one of my favorite movies. Favorite book?
I love a lot of books here as well. I think one that's always had an influence, one that was very influential was When Money Destroys Nations. Gave me a really helpful way to think about money and history and what is happening around me. I also really enjoy The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's kind of a classic throwback, and figuring out that the answer to the world is the number 42.
Very cool. And you may have answered this, but when you're not working at NYDIG, what are you doing for fun as a hobby?
Well, like Bitcoin 24/7, life at NYDIG right now is a pretty 24/7 lifestyle. Hobbies, I love to run, and I also love to shop. I love just seeing creativity and art expressed through clothes and jewelry and shoes, and just the different takes that people have on it.
Awesome. Patrick, pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Tony. It's been great. Really enjoyed it.